I've always or be directly at podcast@gmail.com or on Twitter. Today I'm going to be talking about the hashtag #OneVote. It was pretty much off my radar, and being somebody who follows politics, I'm really surprised that this one actually did go under the radar for me, in the sense that I didn't hear it coming at all. But it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine, Jared, who actually does a military hangout that I'm a part of every week. Links for him will be in the description below. Anyways, what I wanted to get into today about this was a couple of YouTube videos that I found on the topic here. And I went to YouTube and I saw, where did it go? There it goes. I did a search, and actually this top one here, this one's The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, actually didn't show up on my stream at all until today. But I went through a few of these, and this is one that really got me, is the Democratic Party hashtag walk away. From where we go one, we go all, which is a satirical site from what I can tell, or a YouTube channel anyways. But I think they're trying to actually jab a little bit at the I think they were trying to actually jab away at the Democrats who are disenfranchised. That's what the hashtag walkaway movement is actually being disenfranchised from the actual from the Democratic Party. So I went ahead and watched it last night, which I know is unusual for most of the people who watch my show, who listen to it. But I think it's important that we understand what's going on with it.
I feel like the bottom has to fall out at some point. And by the way, I'm hoping for it, because I think one way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy. So please bring on the recession.
Now, one thing I noticed when I was actually researching this last night is a lot of these clips here that you're seeing are actually coming from Justice Janice on the Fox News network. Just kind of keep that in mind on these clips when you're watching it.
They asked me, would I like to debate this gentleman? I said, no. I said, if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. Well, I'd like to punch him in the face.
And of course, they're talking about Donald Trump. They want to, this is the progressive side of the liberal side of politics, the left side of the political spectrum. And I'm just going to let it go and let you guys listen.
Everywhere, people are marching, protesting, tweeting, speaking out, and working for an America that's hopeful, inclusive, and big-hearted. So keep fighting and keep the faith.
And so, let's say the best. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you get that crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Even after Greg just like President Donald Trump as his
Going back here to the lady just before this, she is supposedly an employee of one of the Democratic Party members. And I don't see anything wrong necessarily with her saying, if you have an opinion, talk to these people. I do have an issue with creating a mob where one is not wanted or one is needed necessarily. Disrupting everyday business for businesses that have no control over whether people of the Trump cabinet come and go into their establishment. They should not be judged against that or should be made to feel like they're being attacked by the people involved in this. It's, to me, it's utterly disgraceful for them to call upon this, but I also understand that it's their right to do so. And I think that they should have every right to do that. But I just hope that as you're watching this, you take away that this is not exactly what the hashtag walkaway movement is. It's more what it's about.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death.
You are now not in the presence of nice guys.
Yes.
Promoting violence, promoting murder of the president. That's a bit extreme. It's just, a lot of this is satirical in its nature and the work that they're doing. But at the same time, you can't deny that these people do, under what they have been told, feel that they are being oppressed and marginalized, not heard the way that they want to be heard or think they should be heard. They just sit there and have to take it. I mean, honestly, I just don't. What I don't understand about the right, or anybody that tries to make fun of these movements when they're trying to get their support, is that I don't get is why they do it. I understand that, everything's up for fair game, fodder, all that. Fine. It is one of those situations where we have to, how do I put it? We have to stop the violence. We have to stop promoting violence if we think that it's going to create a call to violence in the sense of physical harm to anybody. Like Jared says in my chat, while it's protected speech, I don't agree with it, even though I'm not a complete Trump supporter. I'm the same way. I understand that's your protected right. I fought for that. Jared fought for that. For you to have the freedom of speech, for you to have the right to put on these plays, to put on these productions. However, you also bear the consequences of your actions. And if you say we need to murder whoever, we need to cause violence to whomever, that onus is on you just as much as it is on the person that acts. If I were to go out there and say, name a person, name an ideology, name whatever, and somebody went out and did that, why should I not be culpable for that? Why should I not be responsible for that? I'm the one who said go do that, and somebody actually listened and took me up on it. Now, you could easily say that it's somebody, well, that's just somebody not getting the sarcasm, the humor that you were trying to get into it. That's not necessarily the point. The point is that I called for it. Whether it's stone-faced and serious, whether it's stone-faced and sarcastic, or even just in general saying it. People can take those things out of context. That's why, you have to be careful when you're in the media whatsoever, whether it's like Madonna here, whether it's Kathy Griffin, where it's myself here on YouTube. You have to be careful about what your message is actually sending, what it is saying. Because even though we have free speech, free and protected speech is not the same as being absolved from the responsibility of it. Why is my spacebar not wanting to work today?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? Now, I want to clarify, I'm not an actor. I lie for a living. However, it's been a while.
Well, that would be, in fact, when John...
And not trying to take Johnny Depp out of context here. He was talking about the exact thing they're bringing up here. John Wilkes Booth is the last actor to assassinate the president. But it's because of the acts of John Wilkes Booth that we have the Secret Service doing what it does. It is in part why it's harder to assassinate a president now than it was, 100 years ago. Even longer than that. I mean, even shorter than that. I mean, heck, John F. Kennedy. The links that Lee Harvey Oswald had to do to make sure that he could get a clear line of sight without necessarily having the Secret Service on him right away. Took some time and planning, albeit not that long from the documentaries I've watched and the books I've read. He only had a few weeks, if even that, because he was told by a coworker, "Oh yeah, the president's coming through here at Dealey Plaza." So, anyways, the point is, Johnny Depp should be thinking hard about what he said. He can stand by it all he wants, and I applaud him if he stands by it. But at the same time, he's got to understand that basically what he said could be construed as a call to violence to the president, and while his speech might be protected, he still will bear some responsibility towards that if somebody acts upon it. Now I know why I'm doing the dual screen thing. I keep forgetting to go back.
Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated Abraham Lincoln, a Republican president, for freeing the slaves, essentially giving up the South's free labor.
This right here, hold on.
Where have I heard that story before?
Following up on an executive order signed by Trump last month, Homeland Security says it plans to speed up the deportation process, hire thousands of new agents, and target more of the 11 million people who are in the country illegally.
The whole point there is that the right, as much as the left, is misconstruing what the Emancipation Proclamation actually says. Abraham Lincoln didn't free all the slaves. He freed the slaves in the Confederate States of America. He didn't have necessarily the authority to, because Britain was treating the Confederate States of America as a separate nation, a standalone nation. We, in the United States, in the Union, did not view it that way, so that's why he acted upon it to write the Emancipation Proclamation. It's still up for debate whether what he did was actually within his power or not. But he said, it isn't in my power, I'm going to do it, and here's why. So, just the right likes to think that he's the savior of the slaves. The left likes to think that as well. However, they do it for different reasons. The Democrats at the time of Lincoln were the conservatives. They wanted to keep things the status quo. Slavery's okay. other conservative values of the time. The Republicans founded behind Abraham Lincoln were the progressives. They're the ones that held most of the abolitionist party, or abolitionist members were in their party, etc. However, throughout history, political ideologies change. I mean, we didn't start out with Democrats and Republicans. We had the Whigs and the Federalists. Then we had the Federalists and the Democratic, or we had the Whigs and the Democratic Republicans, so on and so forth. So it's just crazy that we would think that we would still be the same Democrats and Republican parties that were back in the 1860s, when we've actually flipped the Democrats and the Republicans throughout the 1920s and up till the point where FDR was elected. We're flipping from being social progressive Republicans to being conservative Republicans, and the Democrats going from conservative to social progressives, the New Deal Act, etc. So I am for not closing the borders, but controlling border flow. There is a right way and a wrong way to enter this country. Just because you show up here does not mean that you are free to stay and do whatever, regardless of whether you're abiding the laws or not. You've broken a law. However, I'm okay with the DACA program as well, the Dreamer program. Children that were brought here by their parents, grandparents, other family members illegally, but had no way of protesting themselves being brought over here, and who have pretty much grown up and been cultured by our society, should be allowed to stay if they are productive members of society, if they are contributing to society. They should get an expedited path to citizenship, but it shouldn't just be a give me situation, because then you're going to invite people to just bring children in and be like, oh, well, my child's here, so now I can stay. I honestly think that the parents of the DACA children should be sent back, and simply because they did break the law knowingly, or whoever brought the child over. Once the child has gained citizenship and is of legal age, they can decide whether or not to apply to allow their family member to come back, or support their family member's application to come back into the country legally. I don't know how many of you feel about that, but that's the way I feel about it with DACA. And border control is it's not just the free will of allowing people to come in. And I have no problem with refugees, but not everybody's coming here claiming asylum is coming here for asylum purposes. I'm not talking just about from Muslim countries. I'm talking about from Latin American countries, from Asian countries. Anybody that's come claiming asylum is not necessarily all coming for the same reason. We have to protect ourselves from that invasion. We are a melting pot, yes. We have multiple cultures here, both from Europe, Africa, Asia, plus the native population that we displaced here ourselves. We're not free of blame, but at the same time, right now as who we are, we have to understand that if we allow too many people in, we are going to end up having a huge displacement of people, and it's not going to just stop with displacement of European ancestry people. Next will come, the African Americans, the Hispanics, etc. Will all be displaced by other groups. It's just going to be a vicious cycle of constant flow of replacing each other and then allowing refugees. It's a vicious cycle, is what it is. While I agree with DACA being used to protect the children that didn't have a choice or a voice, my question is the application of what you suggest as a proper recourse. Well, much of the way the DACA program is set up is that the children have to get a degree or be able to get a job. But what I think what I think could be a proper recourse as far as the families is that we set basically a date that and we don't make it public, like announce to the world that this is the date that anybody who comes in with a child after this point, we're automatically sending everybody back, unless there's a legitimate like hostile area they're coming from, specifically say like the border with Mexico and Texas. I'm not saying everybody that flees across that border is going to be safe, but the point I'm trying to get at is that we have to monitor who's coming in and who's staying and who's going. Because I mean, even with our current system, we still have people that manage to find their way back to this country that have been deported 5-6 times, committed egregious crimes here in the United States. Okay, so like for example, say a child comes in, their parents are deported, and the child's only 6 or 7, and who's the guardian of that child at that point is what you're trying to get at, and that's a hard one, and that's and what I'm getting at is because if you put them into the foster care system, they could end up like many of the children that grew up here in the U.S. that are left in orphanages and foster care, that are the negative stories. There are plenty of good stories about that. I mean, I can think of a couple boys right off the top of my head that are with my best friend. But not every family is going to want to take in a child like that. Not every parent's going to want to do things like that. So I can understand that point. I would think, and this is just a quick thought off the top of my head, if say it was a war-torn, well, not even war-torn, say it is an economically depressed country like Venezuela. Let's just say or even Cuba. We could allow the parents to stay if they are law-abiding. They could be given a temporary work visa or something like that. That would allow them to. Well, even that's not going to work. Never mind. Just trying to think off the top of my head, because then it's just going to create more problems of people coming in. Because yeah, I don't have a great idea off the top of my head right now, but the border and immigration is such a hard topic just to come up with answers on the fly that could actually work. It does take some thought, and I don't think that everybody that comes should be able to stay, even if they have children, whether they're violent, criminal or not. I just honestly don't think that everybody that comes should stay if they just try to cross the border. However, for those that are here already, as long as the family themselves are as long as the family themselves are still law-abiding, grant them a work visa. You know, yes, they have broken the law, and I get that. But if they are not, out there committing crimes to feed their family, if they're out there, you know, just working as a farm laborer in California in the San Joaquin Valley or whatever, or if they're working on a ranch in Texas or wherever. If they're up here in Washington State, where I see many Hispanic men and women doing yard work or working for cleaning companies, things like that. If they are being productive, grant them a work visa contingent upon the age of their children. So like if their youngest child that they bring with them is 10, they have 8 years of being the guardian of their child. During that time, we could come up with a way of not necessarily expediting for the parent, but for the child, they could have a way of getting the child expedited to stay. And in that application, they could apply for their parents as well. And the parents could have to go through a more rigorous test, which would require them to learn English as a second language, that they would have to pay for out of their earnings. Maybe because they're not necessarily paying taxes to us because they're not technically legally here. They could end up having being required to go take English as second language courses. And then once they do that, they can then start taking citizenship classes, like civics classes that we took in middle school and high school, hopefully more in depth than what they are now or what they were when I was in. But at the same time, just a thought off the top of my head on that. The border issue is a hard one, and we have so many people that are in the quote unquote Democratic Party that are progressive that just want open borders. That they feel like anytime you say something bad about Islam, Muslims, Hispanics, Latin Americans, etc., that if you say something negative about them, you're casting them all under that blanket, and we're not. But at the same time, there is a process to get into this country that needs to be respected. I don't go to England and demanding to live off of their NHS and their social programs just because I don't like Donald Trump as president. I don't do the same thing to Canada. No, I would expect myself, and I would hope the governments of those countries would expect me to respect their immigration policies and respect that they don't want an influx of people just randomly across their border. That's where I stand on the border policy.
Republicans, mind you, who were started by a group of anti-slavery abolitionists with the sole purpose to free the slaves, who backed their first candidate in Abraham Lincoln, who did in fact free the slaves, making the Democrats lose their mind.
Again, back to my point about the Emancipation Proclamation, he did not free all the slaves. He just freed the ones in the South. It's with the 13th Amendment that comes along. Do we free all the slaves in the country?
The Democrats then, at the turn of the 20th century, did exactly what they've been doing at the turn of the 21st century. They got in the ears of poor, disenfranchised white people, riled them up against the evil black man, and got them to form a three-letter group, the KKK. Much like this century, where they got in the ears of the poor, disenfranchised black man and riled them up against the evil white man, got them to form a violent three-letter group, Black Lives Matter.
Now, this was an interesting parallel. When I watched it, I was like, these are both fair and accurate points. At the time of the turn of the, post Civil War, the Reconstruction era, that's when you had the Democrats creating groups like the KKK, various chapters. I mean, they had national conferences. But it's not the same Democratic Party then that is now. To demonize the name Democratic Party in this way is misleading. The Democrats are not the only ones to blame here. It's the media of both times. It's the way that we as a society act and deal with social the social norms of our values. Is there back then, was there systemic racism and issues? Yes, there was the Jim Crow laws. Even though blacks had the right to vote, they had to prove that they own land and other stuff that, shit, to prove that they could vote. And eventually, after the Reconstruction era ended, that's when you had the full force of the Jim Crow laws in the South. The civil rights movement of the 1950s, 1960s, and into the 70s moved us beyond those barriers. I mean, even before the civil rights movement, we had, women representation in Congress. We had, even before we had women's right to vote, we had nationwide, we had women in Congress. Even before we had full civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we had African American representation in Congress. Not that much, but we still had it. We had been making progress. And now we're to the point where women get equal pay, get equal opportunity at work, yet there's still a promotion of the gender pay gap. All we see in news reports is, police killing black people, or example of citizens shooting and killing black people and getting away with it, like the Zimmerman case and Trayvon Martin. It's not to say that these people didn't do anything wrong and were shot innocently. But at the same time, I understand the point of the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with a lot of what they're doing. Same thing with the social justice group, the intersectionality of feminism and other social inequalities. I could go on topic for this for hours. But the point that I'm trying to make is that demonizing a different political leaning Democratic Party with something similar to now is very misleading and very it's more propaganda than anything. It's anti-truth. You don't present an argument on whatever you're arguing, and then, with lack of a better word here, fallaciously saying, oh, they did it then, they're doing it again now, and forgetting that, by the way, we flipped values and Republicans became conservatives and Democrats became progressives,
Then another Southern Democrat named Jim Crow formed a whole bunch of laws to separate black and white, much like the current situation where they without a white.
Now, I live I live and work even closer to Evergreen State College. Evergreen State College has always had a reputation from basically in the early 90s, when I first heard about it as part of what was known as Knowledge Bowl, a testing of academic knowledge amongst students both from middle school and high schools. We would constantly go up to Evergreen State College. It has always been known to me as a hippie and counterculture college. It has some really great programs, mathematics, engineering, like even some really good literature, but not all of it is. But it's more known for its social justice than it is for what it really offers, and it's just sad.
On campuses, all black award ceremonies, BET.
All right. if you have, if you were, if you were at all surprised by the BETs being an all-black award ceremony, you obviously have never watched BET a day in your life. I don't watch BET because I'm just not into rap and hip hop music. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not my cup of tea. And I don't sit there and go on blasting about BET because it's stupid. It's not affecting me negatively in any way. It's not affecting me at all.
Whites not allowed. It's the same tired scam the Democrats did back then. They just reversed it, pointing to their own crimes to inflame the black community. And they're now doing the same exact thing, only in reverse. This is the party that fought for 100 years to keep down black people, who all of a sudden now are for the black community, yet have driven them into the ground.
Once America's fourth largest city, Detroit, now a stunning $18 billion in debt.
Let's go back to Johnny Depp. Here's him being a total fucking asshole to Amber Heard.
You, I don't agree. Let's go on. Oh, really?
How about Joe Biden?
Okay. How to deal with the Johnny Depp situation in that clip? To me, it's obvious that he's drunk. Does that excuse his actions? Hell no. But we don't have the context of the whole video. So I'm going to reserve judgment when I actually get a chance to find the full video. But going back to what they were saying about what the Democratic Party did and how they're reversing it now, this reverse happened decades ago. And they were actually trying to promote, civil rights, because many people who were progressive saw the errors of the ways of the Democratic Party, but like the initial values that were set up by, the FDRs, the Teddy Roosevelts, etc., as it progressed onwards, and stayed in the Democratic Party and changed it, while many in the Republican Party longed for a more conservative stance. Now we're seeing the swing go way to the extremes on both ends, and now you see, in the Republican right parties, you have the alt-right on the extreme edge. You have the Republicans. Then you have the Libertarians, which are pretty close to center. And the Libertarians are basically liberal conservatives. They want more liberty, but they also want to make sure that those that have the liberty are also responsible for them. Much in the way when you hear Sargon of Akkad talk, he talks about being a classical liberal. That is a person who wants the liberty, but also takes note that they have the responsibility to deal with their actions. Much in the same way that I like to think. They're going to attack here Joe Biden. On kissing little girls, the way politicians generally do. Is it creepy? Yes. Do I agree with it? No. Do I agree with them attacking him in this way? Because again, I think this was mainly meant to be a satire piece, but you can tell that it's very right-wing propagandic towards the Democratic Party, not seeing the Democratic Party as covering the whole left side of the spectrum, but not seeing the individual sections of the left side of the political spectrum.
Biden. Here's him being a creep to every freaking little girl that comes in his presence.
Yes, her face says it all. She's a teenager, he's an old man. It's creepy and disgusting. But at the same time, he is doing what most politicians do, and I'm not condoning that. but context is the key. Taking things out of context, whether for the right reason, the wrong reason, or indifferent reason, doesn't make your point more valid. Doesn't make the point of your argument more valid.
Let's go back to Madonna, one of the many celebrities pretending to be so offended by Donald Trump, offering to give anyone who votes for Hillary a blowjob.
If you vote for Hillary Clinton, I will give you a blowjob.
Or Hillary Clinton, who ran on zero platforms other than I'm a woman and Donald Trump is an evil racist who hates women. Well, here's Hillary Clinton comparing black gangs to super predators and saying they should be made to heal.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heal.
Okay, so the whole politicians flip-flopping on their opinions of things. Well, what happens when you hear something? Not that you've read, not that you've researched, you just hear an anecdotal story about a type of person, a type of group of people. I know in the community I grew up in, predominantly white, hardworking logging and fishing industry and shipping industry town. I didn't have much interaction with children of color, other people of color. But I heard from the adults, racist talk about the Hispanics, about the few African Americans, the Asians in town, mainly the Thai and the Vietnamese. I could have easily accepted those at face value and not cared. The point is I didn't take it at face value. I learned to know these people, and I learned to research and find out who these people really were and what they're like, what their culture is like. The same thing is true of politicians. They do go through cycles where they learn to understand, hey, I have been alienating this group. What is it about this group that I could attract to them? Is it the exact same thing as my analogy, my story? No. But the point is that people do change their understanding of things based upon the information that's given to them. And that's what we need to do in politics. That's what we need to do in our own opinion of politics. But a lot of people don't see that. Now they're going to go on and attack Snoop Dogg back from the 90s.
Stay in the 90s with Snoop Dogg. Well, while he was on trial for murder, Donald Trump was getting praised by the Rainbow Coalition for furthering black people in the workforce.
Now you can see why I hope by now you can see why I think this is a propaganda piece, not so much just satire, but actual propaganda piece on this. Is that I have nothing against Donald Trump. He hasn't done anything that I in any way can foresee being impeachable yet. That's proven by hard, concrete fact. Now, what's going on in the Mueller investigation? I have no clue. I'm not privy to that information, and I won't be privy to it until it's released to the public. The point of the matter is, Donald Trump very well could just be having a publicity stunt right here for all we know to make him seem better. I honestly like to think that he actually did make things better for minority groups, not just in his own work, but in other forms of business, like it says here, becoming business executives, etc.
The Democratic Party does nothing but lie and doesn't give two shits about anyone, and they're essentially domestic terrorists at this point.
I did not have sexual relations with Ms. Lewinsky, and I'm staying on my former statement about it.
Okay. Cancel that really quick. the whole point of that video, the reason why I wanted to talk about that video is, again, because it is very much a hit piece. But what I did is I also went to look up as part of my research, I saw this story as well as a couple more that shared with me the link to the hashtag walkaway fan site on YouTube, where it is pretty much this person is taking the hashtag walkaway campaign video or walkaway videos from their Facebook group and moving them here to YouTube. And I think that it is actually a very good idea that people be aware of why there is an issue with the movements as a whole. Let me just a second here. I think that the underlying issue here is that people need to understand that the hashtag walkaway movement is a rebellion against the progressivism, the regressivism of the left. But it's not a full embrace of the right, the alt-right, or even libertarianism. It is solely, hey, we are Democrats, but we are not your Democrats. We are liberals, but we are not your progressive liberals. Yes, I agree with you on that one, Jared. Trump loves immigrants. He's always marrying one. LOL. Humor with the truth. That is so true. But the point, and you can see from my history that I do see a lot of anti-social justice, but I'm also trying to get more into the social justice side of things, because how can I justifiably watch these videos and discuss these topics without actually hearing what these people have to say and going back and researching them on my own? That's the thing. The difference between the people that are walking away from the Democratic Party and the social justice and the alt-right is that they are actually seeing, I don't want to say for the first time, but they're seeing the truth of the matter is that we are being pulled to extremes and that we need to start coming back towards the middle. Otherwise, the foundation of our system, our democratic republic, will break apart. If you watch last night's Veterans Talk Weekly hangout about on Jared's channel, we actually discussed why the electoral college is a good thing versus an open vote system, one person, one vote for the presidency. And that is because the Midwest states won't be as represented in their voice of voting for the president. Because all it takes is a few major cities, few healthy counties of population to overturn what the rest of the country wants. And that's not fair to those that just have a different opinion than you. It's not fair to even the liberal Democrat that didn't want to vote for Hillary, but wanted to vote for, but voted for her anyways because they didn't want to be ostracized, or they voted for Trump and now their voice feels like it's been heard. Politics is in my opinion, a win-lose-lose situation. It doesn't matter whether you win, because you're still going to lose in the long run anyways, over some sort of petty dispute between a politician and somebody else, which forces that politician to either resign or something that comes out later after they've retired or even after they passed on to discredit them. It's like when people discuss history, they take a lot of things out of context, or they even discuss things out of context in the sense of, for example, Thomas Jefferson. They want to apply our values of racism to the founding fathers. They want to apply our values of equality to the founding fathers. Yet, when you look at who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who helped write the Constitution, those men, a lot of those men were slave owners. And the Three-Fifths Compromise, I can't believe I'm actually quoting or referencing a Prager U video. I don't really like their presentation, but Prager U actually had a video run as an ad for me, and I actually watched the whole thing. About the Three-Fifths Compromise isn't about saying that a slave in and of themselves was 3/5 a person, but that it was that as far as census was concerned, it was about the representation, because most of the population of the United States during the formation of the formation of the country after the Constitution was centered in Philadelphia and New York and Boston, much like it still is today. But they had an overwhelming majority of representation versus that of the southern states, which was predominantly populated by the African American slave population. So the North and the South agreed to the Three-Fifths Compromise. That the slave was still deemed a person in the Constitution as part of the Three-Fifths Compromise, but only counted for 3/5 a person as far as representation goes, so it could balance out the congressmen, the House of Representatives. Take it for what you will. I'm going to try and pull up the Prager U video and link it into my description down below. But applying our values today to history makes everybody seem like they're Neanderthals by comparison. I mean, even going back to World War II and having segregated army groups, military groups, etc., making on Navy ships specifically, only black people cook and be stewards and things like that. It's not fair to the people that passed, whether they did good or bad, to judge them by the context of our social norms. It's not fair to them to be treated with the lens of what we view as our social inequalities today, what we view as our social injustices, what we view as our values today. I gladly welcome anybody to discuss them, to discuss the topics openly, even passionately. But just remember that these discussions are not meant to be a battle in and of themselves. I know I'm not going to change many people's minds or opinions. I don't think that I don't delude myself with grandeur that I'm going to sway my friends that are progressive, that are of the social justice groups. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm going to be able to persuade them to come back to a more centrist view. And I hope that they have the same respect towards me, that they don't think that they're going to sway me with their arguments. I love history. I love sharing them. For those of you that are watching this live or watching it later, Jared just posted the link in the chat as well. But I think for the most part, we have to get over the fact that what we value now is what's going to be in for all time. It's not. We need to look forward and we need to look backwards and understand that by looking backwards, we can learn from those mistakes, apply them to the present, and hopefully they hold true to the future, or at least that the future will be able to see something wrong that can be addressed later. So with that, I'm going to take my leave for today. I actually have to get ready for work today, and I've got to gotta try and spend some time around the house. So, not to mention I have homework to do too. So, hopefully you guys will enjoy your weekend. If you get a chance, again, go check out Jared. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Buetow, I don't know. Check out his channel. It'll be linked below. I'll throw in a link of a few of the other channels that I watch, and hopefully you guys will understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully you'll learn to appreciate the finer, or not the finer things, but the finer points of politics. I hope that you'll take the time to hear your opponent and listen to them. You can still disagree with them, but hear them out and understand their point of view. Have a great weekend. This has been Jay for Jay's Politics Podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. You can visit that podcast99.org or me directly at jpoliticspodcast at gmail.com or at jpoliticpodcast on Twitter. Have a great weekend.